Transforming your life with hypnotherapy just got easier with your host, Julie from CoachingHypnosis.net.
Welcome back, dear listener, to Coaching Hypnosis. Yesterday, we zoomed out to the terrifying heights of Cold War military espionage to look at how Ivy League academics tried to partition human identity for the state. Today, we're moving out of the government safe houses into the predatory world of unlicensed, pseudo-scientific commercial operations. We're looking at a group of private operators who didn't hide behind government classification codes. They operated right out in the open, preying on vulnerable families, charging thousands of dollars and warping their psychological violations in the language of faith, healing, and spiritual transformation. Today, we break down the landmark civil fraud case against the organization that called itself JONAH, an acronym for Jews Offering New Alternatives for Healing. Now, to be completely clear, the founders chose this specific name because they were explicitly targeting families within their own tight-knit religious community. They weren't an artificial religious body. They were a private commercial entity that used the shared cultural and spiritual identity of their clients as an immediate way to build unearned trust. They took advantage of devout parents and young men who were tearing themselves apart trying to reconcile their innate identity with their faith, using that deep desire for community belonging as a massive psychological leverage point. In our field, age regression is a highly specialized advanced clinical intervention. When used ethically by a trained professional, it allows a client to safely bypass their current adult critical faculty, revisit a past emotional imprint, and reframe an old trauma so their nervous system can finally stop firing it in the present. It is designed to be a tool of absolute liberation, helping a person integrate their past so they can step cleanly into their sovereign future. But when a powerful hypnotic tool is hijacked by an ideological agenda and a desire for profit, regression can easily be turned into a weapon of psychological demolition. The directors of this operation took aggressive, unscientific, pseudo-hypnotic age regression techniques and used them under the guise of conversion therapy, falsely promising desperate clients and their devout families that they could fundamentally rewrite a person's innate sexual orientation. They used high-pressure environments to systematically tear down their clients' psychological boundaries, manufacture false childhood traumas, and exploit their deepest vulnerabilities. But in 2015, a New Jersey jury saw right through the spiritual veneer. They handed down a unanimous, groundbreaking verdict that hit these predatory operators exactly where it hurts: their wallets. Today, we decode the raw clinical mechanics of weaponized regression and the historic legal precedent that exposed it as a commercial fraud. To understand the sheer, calculated manipulation behind this operation, you have to look at how these charlatans engineered compliance. They didn't target random people. They specifically marketed their services to young men, tearing themselves apart for trying to reconcile their innate identity with their strict religious upbringings. By stepping into the role of the ultimate spiritual and psychological arbiters, these unlicensed facilitators established an immediate high-stakes baseline of authority over well-meaning, deeply faithful families. The core of their therapy relied on forcing clients into intense, highly charged pseudo-hypnotic regression sessions. In a legitimate clinical setting, regression is carefully paced, tracking actual organic memories with deep respect for a client's safety. These facilitators, however, used aggressive, fast-paced verbal driving, sensory deprivation, and high-pressure emotional pacing to force clients into a hypersuggestible state. Once the client's conscious defenses were completely down, the facilitator systemically executed a highly destructive 3-step psychological script. Step 1, vulnerability pacing. target individuals in deep personal crisis, leveraging family expectations and religious devotion to establish total control over the client's psyche. Step 2. Aggressive pseudo-regression. Use high-pressure verbal driving and emotional exhaustion to bypass the conscious mind's logical gatekeeper, forcing the brain into a hypersuggestible state. Step 3. False narrative implantation. Explicitly suggest and implant false memories of childhood emotional neglect or parental failure, blaming the client's innate identity on an engineered past flaw. Facilitators would explicitly command clients in deep states to regress to their earliest childhood memories, aggressively nudging and suggesting their sexual orientation was the direct result of a broken relationship with their parents. They even forced young men to undergo bizarre, ritualistic humiliations like stripping down in front of mirrors to expose their flaws, all while under the heavy, deeply conditioned suggestion that their psychological meat grinder was the secret to unlocking their true selves. Let's look at the absolute sarcastic absurdity of what these charlatans were selling. You have completely uncertified operators. One of the lead counsellors had a background in theatre, not psychology, who genuinely convinced themselves and their paying clients that human biology is just a temporary software glitch. They claimed a bad childhood memory could just be dug up, beaten with a tennis racket, and completely reprogrammed through ritualistic shame. It is the absolute peak of arrogant, predatory delusion. If a practitioner today tells you that the secret to aligning your subconscious involves entering an emotional blender where you have to strip naked and blame your parents for your DNA, you don't say, wow, look at this deep spiritual breakthrough. You walk out, check their credentials, and call the nearest consumer fraud division. But under the heavy fog of religious guilt and high-pressure environments, these young men were led to believe their ongoing distress was their personal failure, not the techniques. They thought the unscientific commands were fixing their internal compass, when in reality the operators were just blowing up the entire command center for $100 an hour. As strategic hypnotists and modern performance coaches, we must strip away the ideological noise and rigorously analyze the exact clinical boundaries these operators crossed, because it highlights the extreme danger of narrative contamination in trance work, the trap of forced confabulation. In hypersuggestible states, if an authority figure repeatedly insists that a specific cause must exist, such as childhood trauma or parental neglect, the subconscious mind will actively manufacture highly vivid, completely false memories to satisfy the operator's demands. These coaches weaponize this vulnerability to create a trauma where no one existed, damaging real-world families in the process. The weaponization of catharsis. True emotional release in hypnosis should be liberating, grounding, and protective of the client's sovereignty. These operators used intense emotional pain not to heal, but to systemically exhaust the client's nervous system. By keeping the client in a perpetual state of emotional crisis, their logical critical faculty remained entirely offline, making them completely dependent on the coach. The consumer fraud precedent. The ultimate collapse of this operation didn't happen in a clinical boardroom. It happened under the cold light of consumer protection law. The Southern Poverty Law Center stepped in on behalf of the victims, and the New Jersey court made a historic move. They didn't argue theology, they argued commerce. They ruled that promising a commercial cure for an inherent, naturally occurring human variation using unscientific, unproven psychological tricks was literal commercial fraud. The organization was ordered to permanently shut down its operations, pay millions in damages, and its directors were legally permanently barred from ever offering conversation services. The organization was ordered to permanently shut down its operations, pay millions in damages, and its directors were legally permanently barred from ever offering conversion services again. They tried to turn a profound tool of retrospective healing into a commercial machine for forced psychological conformity, completely underestimating the resilient, unyielding truth of human identity. The profound historical lesson of this New Jersey case is an undeniable reminder that any psychological tool that requires you to shame your past, dismantle your innate biology, or bow to an external authority's version of who you are is a toxic script. An ethical guide, whether a coach, a consultant, or clinical hypnotist, will always use trance to help you accept your history, sharpen your self-trust, and ground your nervous system in your own absolute, authentic, present authority. True mastery is never about erasing who you are. It is about completely unburdening your mind so you can execute at your highest, most authentic level. If you are carrying the invisible exhaustion of trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit, or you've been letting external expectations and old conditioned programming dictate how you show up in your life and your business, it is time to step out of the shame loop and reclaim your uncompromised execution. If you're ready to clear that cognitive noise, ground your nervous system in undeniable reality, and lead your business with a powerful, completely self-trusting mind, I invite you to book your free 40-minute clarity call. Together, we will clear the collective baggage, align your subconscious with your true present identity, and install an unshakable foundation for your true sovereign power. Remember, aligned subconscious plus healed history equals unshakable leadership. Thank you for listening. Align your mind, visualize your future, grow your business. Mindfully yours, Julie.